Hello everybody, Kearon here with Explorminate, and welcome to another little piece of content I'm going to be doing here for Sanctus Reach. It's been a while, right? For those of you who watched my first little series, welcome back. For those of you who have missed it, glad you're joining us. Sanctus Reach is a pretty unique video game in the sense that it is an incredibly faithful adaptation of the Warhammer 40,000 tabletop game with the miniatures and the hundreds of hours of painting and all that you're probably familiar with if you're watching this video, and takes that and says, hey, you don't have to spend hundreds of hours and hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. You can get a pretty similar experience for your computer for a fraction of the price and time. And that was one thing that was pretty interesting to me about the game. Now, why am I picking this time to look at Sanctus Reach again? Well, it's because there's been a pretty sizable piece of content that's been dropped. Um, the kind folks over at Slytherin were nice enough to give us a copy of Sons of Cadia. That is the name of the new DLC. It's not really I don't know if you'd really call it an expansion. I looked over their Steam page; they don't really specify. Or just call it the new piece of content, I guess, if you will. Uh, they gave us a copy, and I said, sure, I liked what I played with Sanctus Reach. Let's have more. So, Sons of Cadia, we're going to take a step back, and I am going to attempt, with my elementary knowledge of Warhammer 40k lore, to explain to you what in the heck this is. So, as you can see here, these guys do not look like these guys or these guys. They are not space wolves. They are not a chapter of the Space Marines. These are just kind of your regular run-of-the-mill mankind fight. This is the Astra Militarum, I believe is how it's said, otherwise known as the Imperial Guard. That's what I knew them as. It's not the fancy name. But so this is the Imperial Guard. These are, if you and I got drafted in the future to go fight orcs and demons and tyrannids and all that fun stuff, we'd be this guy. We're probably not going to be a space marine as much as we think, and we're probably going to die. The Imperial Guard, they just throw men at the problem, and they back up those relatively weak numbers. Well, not weak numbers of men. There's a lot of men. They back up the relatively weak soldiers with uh, very potent armor, machines, and things like that. So they're very fun to play in that sense. And they play different. I should say that to start out with. A little bit more background here before we dive into some gameplay. From what I understand and the little research I did, Cadia is a Terran-like planet, kind of much like Earth is, of course, much in the future. So, Sons of Cadia, it's just kind of like saying, hey, I'm slipping it. There's various groups in World War One, World War Two that were known from like where they came from. Um, it's just kind of that kind of thing. So that's where they get the name um, Sons of Cadia for this expansion, this DLC, this content pack, right? And it does add a lot to it. I'm just going to do a brief rundown here, and this is mostly pulled off of the Steam page. They're point by point, but to give you an idea of what it is, and then in the next 2 to 3 videos after this, we are going to kind of show this off, and I want to give you an idea of what it is, and what it isn't. This is not going to get a full-fledged review. But I wanted to do a little video feature on it because I felt like this was something worth covering. So obviously the crux of it is we do have this brand new faction, and with that comes a new campaign. Let's pull up the campaign map here, Rick, if it's going to let me. There we go. You start here much like before. You kind of complete out, and it says there are 9 story scenarios for the long campaign. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, these 9, and then you got the skirmishes in between to kind of like unlock them, if you will. So haven't played a ton through the campaign. I've done some with skirmish, some with the first mission, and we'll load into that in a moment. But from what I've played, it the flow of the campaign and stuff in terms of like how it works mechanically mission to mission seems to be very similar to the vanilla version of Sanctus Reach, which if you liked, great. If you didn't, um, uh, look into it. They have made some changes from what I've seen. One of those is it's not just like, hey, you get these guys, they sound cool. Um, they're trying to make it a focus on a long campaign from the Imperial Guard's perspective. So you are going to be playing as Imperial Guard, of course. So with that, you get a bunch of new units, vehicles, even a new Imperial Knight. They talk about, and I think it's 27 units total. So pretty sizable roster, which is nice. But before I get too far away from the whole long campaign idea, your heroes will progress and your units will progress and they will get abilities. And that manifests itself in the form of you got these little buttons on the left side, and you pick something, and hey, now your regular group of, well, they're not regular anymore. They've leveled up, right? They're kind of special. Your otherwise normal tank or unit of Bulgren or whatnot now have maybe a heal ability, or they get some cover bonus, or they can reveal part of the map. So it's kind of cool. I'm actually really looking forward to playing that on my own a lot more because that will get me more invested in the units. And I think that's a really smart move on their part to make that campaign feel more meaningful. Um, I mentioned the 4 heroes, the 27 units, the ability progression tree, um, and then of course the heart and soul of it is the Astra Militarum, otherwise known as the Imperial Guard. That's what I will just refer to them as Imperial Guard from now on in case I'm just completely blowing that pronunciation out. Um, and they play very different. We'll see in a second when I load into the very end of the first mission. It's not going to be your typical Space Wolf map. It's a lot more buddies, to say the least. But yeah, that's kind of an overhead, really quick skim the top of what this is. But let's jump into some gameplay where I have this in the first mission. I think we'll finish that up for this first episode so you can kind of see how they play, and I'm going to show off a few cool little things here and there. Alright guys, so this is turn 7. I believe it started with 20 turns, and it's your typical hold the line scenario type. You've seen this in strategy games before, and as you notice I have killed me quite a few orcs, and they've done me a solid here too. We're losing some dudes. It's kind of sad. But this is the Imperial Guard. This is kind of how they're sitting. So notice no big beefy armor on your guys. You do have pretty cool tanks. I think their vehicles are a lot cooler than like the Space Marine or the tanks and whatnot. You've got your big artillery pieces back here. Let me just show a few of these off actually. So Earth Shatter Cannon. I'm gonna pull my weapon stats. Let's rain death upon these fine folk. That was sarcasm when I said fine folk. This is the Red Wog, who's descending on me. I don't like them too much. Oh, we're gonna do an attack here real quick. 50% chance? That's pretty terrible. We're gonna go with it. This is an example of leveling up like I talked about, so I'm not going to really go into it on this particular video. But you see you got 2 options here, and these guys I believe last turn, yeah, I chose Med Pack, so it's a heal ability that they get 2-turn cooldown, which is actually pretty darn generous, I feel like. So that's a little example of the long campaign, how you're going to be getting abilities on your units, because these guys have that heal ability, these guys do not, and they are hurting very, very bad. Another couple cool things. This is my leader, Jarkenstein, I believe is how you'd say that. That's how I'm going to say it, even if it isn't. Let me show off one of his abilities that is pretty cool. Do we have... I thought we had something to kill somewhere. Do we not? We might waste this. Let's call in an Imperial Barrage. So you can call in off-map artillery support. Again, very much like the Imperial Guard. You know, their guys are a dime a dozen, but they bring in that pretty great firepower to back them up when they need it. Finish him off. Finish him off. Come on. Not quite. Your tanks are pretty cool. They have a heavy bolter that is always a free action. At least most of them seem like it. This is kind of a middle tiered unit. Well, middle tiered. What I'm saying is it's not like as strong as a tank, but it's an armored sentinel. And he's going to see if he can't finish off these annoying little orcs for us. He's got his laser cannon. Are they called laser cannons? Yeah, laser cannon. There we go. Proud of myself for remembering that. And then you might have noticed, what is this really cool little purple floaty ball right there? I do have a Psyker. So remember in 40k, if you're not familiar with it, well, I don't exactly know what Psykers are. Think of them as like space wizards. They don't use magic. They're Psykers. Very different. But he called that area effect in, which wrecked these two walkers, whatever you want to call them, which otherwise we're probably going to tear these guys a new one. And then your Imperial Guard are just your run-of-the-mill. You know, they've got laser guns, flamethrowers, and whatnot. Anything else I can shoot? I mean, let's shoot at you here. This is the end, so I think I'm going to start running out of things to do real quick. We'll let some orcs run on this screen while I talk. But that's kind of a good representation of the units. Oh, I didn't talk about these guys. The Bulgrin or the Ogrin. They are essentially the ogres of the future. So if you're familiar with fantasy Warhammer, you know, you've got ogres and like the ogre kingdoms, or the dogs of war were mercenaries and whatnot. If, you know, humanity lived and the ogres survived, these are, let's zoom in on these pretty guys. That's what the Ogrin or the Bulgrin are. They're tougher, you know, a little over 1,000 hits compared to my 400, so a lot better. And these guys thankfully have these beefy looking shields, so they were closing the line that my defensive wall had been blown up on. But yeah, that gives you kind of an idea of what the game looks like, how the units look. You know, you've got the nice artillery. I've called in lots of airstrikes, off-map bombardment, and I've just had to hold this point, so that was the objective. Oh, someone's going to move over. Oh, that walker decided to go around. Okay, we'll do your thing. Just don't blow anybody up. I want to keep everybody alive if I can for the next mission. I think we'll finish this up real quick like. Medium damage, we'll take it. Hee. That's actually doing decent to him. I like when it says very low. It still has like 50 damage. And then, you know, if you're familiar with Sanctus Reach, we got all these stats down here: range, accuracy, the number of shots, and the damage, and the power, and the piercing. And I'm just reading these. Essentially, I mean, these matter for a flamethrower, for example, has almost no piercing. So it's going to have a hard time doing damage to armored units. But something like this guy who was doing well, you know, high piercing, high power, and things like that. So that's what I had meant earlier in the video when I said this is a pretty good representation of like the board game. Like it does a good job trying to represent that, I think, in an easily accessible way. Boom, take him out. Take him out. That also saves you, you know, hundreds of hours. Literally, you could very easily spend hundreds of hours trying to play Warhammer 40k in real life, and I'm sure some of you have, and that's not a bad thing. But sometimes, if you're like me, every time you go into, you know, a hobby store, you're like, man, I'd love to play 40k, and then you just think about the time and the money and the time and the time and the time, and it's like that kind of stinks, right? You want to take part in that universe in that way. Maybe that's been a barrier. It's one thing Sanctus Reach does a good job, and the AI isn't stupid. Like, I don't think it's anything to like write home about in terms of it's not like breaking records, but it's not like stupid. I'd say it's about as good as most AI out there. And where it is I'm gonna say real-time strategy, turn-based real-time strategy, I guess I might classify it as. I think AI in those types of games typically is a little easier to deal with. Or shatter, take that out. it's just easier to program that than say a whole 4X game like maybe Civilization or Stellaris or something, right? There's a lot more moving parts there. So I think we're gonna leave it here. I don't want to overstay my welcome with this first video, but again, like I said, this is meant to be an introduction to the Imperial Guard. Let's pan around for one nice last epic shot here. But we're going to do a couple more videos. I want to look at the second campaign a little bit, and we're going to show off how unit progression and all that works. Um, and then we'll kind of just do like I said, with the number of videos I'm going to do, we'll probably do kind of a summary at the end. But anyhow, thank you for watching. Hopefully this has been informative and a little bit enjoyable for you. Let me know if you've played Sons of Cadia yourself, what you think of it. If you haven't, let me know if you have any questions. Even if I don't get to them in these videos, I try to keep an eye on my videos. So if you ever have a question, hit me up. I'll answer you what I can. But thanks for watching, and we'll catch you with the next episode. Thanks.